All right. So I want to start today's conversation with something that honestly stopped me in my tracks when I first came across it. Scientists have now detected microplastic particles inside the human brain. Not just in the gut, not just in the liver, not just in the lungs, in the brain. And when researchers looked more closely, they found that the concentration of microplastics in human brains has increased significantly over just the last 8 years or so. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about a distant, abstract environmental problem anymore. The kind of thing you see in a documentary about ocean pollution, where they show you a sea turtle tangled up in plastic bags, and you feel bad for a moment, and then you move on with your life. No, this is deeply, uncomfortably personal. These particles are inside us, inside you and me right now, and they've been accumulating quietly and invisibly for years. Now, here's the thing. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I genuinely am not. Because if I just gave you the sobering facts, without giving you any way to respond to them, that wouldn't be medicine. That would just be anxiety. And you can get that plenty of other places. What I want to do today is something different. I want to walk you through the actual biology of how microplastics get in, what they do once they're there, and most importantly, what the science tells us about how to reduce your internal plastic load using tools you literally already have in your kitchen. A lot of this framework comes from the work of Dr. William Li, a physician and scientist who you may know from his research on angiogenesis and food as medicine. He's applied that same rigorous, evidence-based lens to the microplastics problem, and what he's laid out is genuinely practical. Not fear-mongering, not supplement pushing, just real strategies grounded in real biology. And I promise, by the end of this conversation, you're going to feel informed and equipped, not panicked. Let's go. First, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what microplastics actually are, because I think there's a lot of confusion around the terminology. Microplastics are tiny plastic particles, typically defined as smaller than 5 millimeters, but many of the most concerning ones are far, far smaller than that. We're talking about particles measured in micrometers, or even nanometers, things you absolutely cannot see with the naked eye. Things that can pass through biological barriers that were never designed to deal with plastic. Where do they come from? They come from everywhere. From the breakdown of larger plastic items, water bottles, food packaging, synthetic clothing. From the degradation of plastic agricultural equipment and farm crates. From the microfibers shed every time you wash a fleece jacket or a polyester shirt. And increasingly, researchers are pointing to car tires as a massive and underappreciated source. Every time a tire rolls down the road, it sheds microscopic rubber and plastic particles. Those particles become airborne, and they end up in the air you breathe every single day, regardless of whether you live in a city or a rural area. The routes of exposure are numerous. You inhale them, you ingest them through food and water. And once inside the body, the smallest particles, the nanoplastics, can actually cross the gut lining and enter the bloodstream. From there, they've been found in the placenta, in breast milk, in arterial walls, in lung tissue, and now, as I mentioned at the top, in brain tissue. From a medical standpoint, what concerns us about microplastics isn't just the physical presence of the particles themselves. It's also what they carry with them. Plastics are manufactured with a range of chemical additives, stabilizers, plasticizers, flame retardants, pigments, and many of these chemicals have known biological effects. Some are endocrine disruptors, meaning they interfere with our hormonal signaling systems. Others are linked to oxidative stress and inflammation, and some have been identified as potentially carcinogenic. Additionally, microplastics can act as what scientists call vectors, essentially tiny vehicles that pick up and carry other environmental pollutants like heavy metals, pesticides, and persistent organic pollutants, and ferry them into tissues where they wouldn't normally reach. So yes, this is a real biological concern, not a hypothetical future risk, a present-day, right-now biological challenge. But here's what I want you to hold on to throughout this entire conversation. Your body is not helpless. Your digestive system, your immune system, your liver and kidneys, these systems evolved precisely to handle toxins and foreign materials. The question isn't whether your body has defenses. The question is whether you're giving those defenses the support and the tools they need to work effectively. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about, starting with something as simple as how you wash your vegetables. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, at the kitchen sink. Because one of the first things Dr. Lee emphasizes, and I think it's brilliant precisely because it's so accessible, is that a huge amount of the microplastic burden in our food can actually be addressed with one very simple intervention. And that intervention costs exactly $0. Cold running water for 60 seconds. Now I know what some of you are thinking. I already rinse my produce. And maybe you do. But there's a meaningful difference between a quick splash under the tap for 3 or 4 seconds and what Dr. Lee is recommending here. Let me explain why the technique matters. Think about the journey your fruits and vegetables take before they reach your kitchen. They're harvested in fields and placed in plastic crates and bins. They're transported, sometimes across continents, in plastic-lined containers, packed in trucks and cargo planes. They sit in plastic packaging on the shelves of grocery stores. At every single one of those steps, there is potential for microplastic contamination, particles shedding from plastic surfaces, settling onto the surface of the food, adhering to the skin of that apple or that cucumber or those strawberries. And then, most of us bring them home and give them a quick 3-second rinse and call it done. Here's what Dr. Lee recommends instead. Get a large, deep metal mixing bowl. This is important. Metal, not plastic. And place your produce in it. Then, run cold water over it for a full 60 seconds. The key is that the bowl is deep and not overloaded, so the water actually has room to circulate properly and flush the surfaces of the food. You're not just wetting the produce. You're creating a water flow that physically dislodges and carries away the particles that are sitting on the surface. And here's an additional bonus that Dr. Lee points out, citing USDA guidelines. 60 seconds of cold running water is also sufficient to remove the vast majority of surface bacteria on produce. So you're addressing two concerns at once, microbial safety and microplastic burden, with a single, zero-cost habit change. Now, is this going to eliminate 100% of microplastics from your food? Of course not. Some plastics are already embedded in the tissue of the food, absorbed through the roots, or internalized through the growing process. We can't get those out with a rinse. But we can make a meaningful dent in the surface load, the accumulated schmutz, as Dr. Lee calls it, from the plastic supply chain. And meaningful is worth doing. The bowl, cold water, 60 seconds. Write it down. Put it on your fridge if you need to. All right, so we've talked about how to handle produce coming into your kitchen. Now let's talk about the kitchen itself. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. For many people, their kitchen is a significant ongoing source of microplastic exposure. Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because the tools that have been standard for decades are now known to be problematic. Dr. Lee frames this really helpfully as a then versus now shift. There was a time, not that long ago, when plastic kitchen tools were celebrated. They were lightweight, they were cheap, they were colorful, they were convenient. We filled our drawers with plastic spatulas, our shelves with plastic storage containers, our counters with plastic cutting boards. It felt like progress. And now we know that plastic, especially when exposed to heat or mechanical stress, sheds particles constantly into your food, into your drink, into your family's meals, day after day, week after week. So, let's do a quick kitchen audit together. I want to go through the specific swaps that are most high impact. First, cooking utensils. If you have plastic spatulas or plastic stirring spoons in your kitchen, these need to go. When plastic utensils are exposed to heat, and in a kitchen, that's essentially all the time, they shed at an accelerated rate. The plastic breaks down and deposits particles directly into whatever you're cooking. The replacements are simple: wood or metal. A wooden spoon costs a few dollars. A stainless steel spatula costs a few dollars. These are not luxury upgrades. This is just making a better choice. Second, food storage containers. This is probably the biggest one in most people's kitchens. Plastic storage containers, the lightweight tubs you use for leftovers, for meal prep, for packing lunches, these shed particles into the food stored inside them. And if you're heating food in them, that significantly accelerates the process. The switch to make here is glass or metal. Pyrex glass containers are widely available, extremely durable, and do an excellent job of keeping food fresh. Stainless steel containers are another great option. Now here's a nuance that Dr. Lee mentions that I think is worth flagging. If your glass containers have plastic lids, which most of them do, that's actually okay, as long as the lid doesn't come in direct contact with the food. So don't overfill your glass containers to the point where the food is pressing against the plastic lid, and you're fine. Third, social habits around plastic drinkware. This one catches people off guard. You know those ubiquitous red plastic cups that show up at every tailgate, every backyard barbecue, every birthday party? Those cups are actually high-shedding plastic items, and when they're filled with cold drinks, the plastic still sheds. It doesn't require heat to release particles. I'm not saying you need to become the person who shows up to the party with their own glass, but just being aware of this and choosing alternatives when you have the option is a meaningful step. Fourth, cleaning tools. Take a look at the brushes and scrapers you use to clean your dishes and your produce. Many of these have plastic bristles. Swap them for bamboo scrapers, which are genuinely excellent for getting stuck on food off pans and cutting boards. Or brushes with natural fiber bristles. Again, these are inexpensive, widely available, and a straightforward improvement. Fifth, grocery shopping habits. Those thin, clingy plastic produce bags at the grocery store? Skip them. They're one of the most disposable, high-turnover plastic items in the average person's life. Switch to reusable cloth produce bags. Cotton mesh bags work beautifully. They're breathable, which can actually keep produce fresher for longer, and they eliminate one more source of plastic contact with your food during transport. And sixth, how you dry your produce. This one is subtle but interesting. After you've done your 60-second rinse, you need to dry your produce, especially thin-skinned items like apples, cucumbers, grapes, or peppers. Many people reach for a paper towel, fine, or a dish towel. And here's the catch. If you're using a microfiber dish towel, you need to know that microfiber fabric is essentially woven plastic. It's polyester or a polyester blend. When you rub it against wet produce, it can shed tiny plastic fibers onto the surface you just carefully cleaned. The fix is simple. Use real cotton towels to dry your produce. Not microfiber, not polyester. Cotton. None of these changes require a complete kitchen renovation. They're gradual swaps that you can make one at a time as things wear out and need replacing. The goal is just to move in a consistent direction, away from plastic contact with your food, wherever you can reasonably do so. Okay, now we're getting into the really exciting territory. Because while the kitchen interventions are important, and they genuinely are, the most powerful defense your body has against microplastics that do make it inside isn't at the sink or in your storage cabinet. It's in your gut. And the key player in that defense is dietary fiber. Let me paint a picture for you, because I think the way Dr. Lee frames this is brilliant and really sticks with you once you hear it. Imagine your gut, your entire gastrointestinal tract, from stomach to colon, as a 40-foot garden hose. That's roughly the actual length of the adult human digestive system, by the way. And like any garden hose, what matters isn't just what goes in at the top. What matters enormously is the integrity of the walls. Is the hose intact? Is it strong? Or are there cracks and weak points where things can seep out that shouldn't? In the gut, the condition where that lining becomes compromised is called intestinal permeability, or what's more colloquially known as leaky gut. And when the gut lining is compromised, things that should stay inside the digestive tract, toxins, microplastics, bacterial byproducts, can pass through the wall and enter the bloodstream. From there, they have access to essentially every organ in the body. Now, dietary fiber addresses this entire situation through not one, not two, but three distinct mechanisms. And I love this because it illustrates just how elegantly our biology responds to the right inputs. Mechanism 1. Binding. As dietary fiber moves through your digestive tract, it physically interacts with microplastic particles. Certain types of fiber, especially soluble fiber, which forms a gel-like substance in the presence of water, are particularly good at binding to particles and toxins. Think of it almost like a sticky net moving through your gut. The fiber captures the microplastics, binds them, and ensures they complete the journey out of your body rather than being absorbed into your tissues. This is not a metaphor. This is actual physical chemistry happening inside your gut every time you eat fiber. Mechanism 2. Structural reinforcement of the gut lining. Beyond binding toxins, fiber plays a crucial structural role. The bacteria in your gut, your microbiome, ferment fiber and produce compounds that nourish the cells lining your intestinal wall. This keeps those tight junctions, the microscopic seals between intestinal cells, strong and intact. A fiber-fed microbiome means a stronger gut wall. A stronger gut wall means fewer opportunities for microplastics and their associated chemical passengers to slip through into your bloodstream. Mechanism 3. Anti-inflammatory protection. When your gut bacteria ferment fiber, one of the key byproducts of that fermentation process is a family of molecules called short-chain fatty acids, things like butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These are incredibly beneficial compounds. They are the primary fuel source for your colonocytes, the cells lining your colon. They regulate immune function. And critically, they lower systemic inflammation. Why does this matter for microplastics? Because one of the primary mechanisms through which microplastics cause harm is inflammation. The particles and the chemicals they carry trigger inflammatory responses in tissues throughout the body. Short-chain fatty acids produced from fiber fermentation essentially push back against that inflammation, counteracting some of the damage that microplastic exposure causes. So, fiber is doing three things simultaneously. It's physically catching microplastics before they can be absorbed. It's reinforcing the structural barrier that keeps particles out of your bloodstream. And it's producing anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce the damage caused by particles that do make it through. Fiber blocks, removes, and protects against microplastics. That's how Dr. Lee summarizes it. And when you understand the three mechanisms, you can see why each of those three words is exactly right. Now, and I want to be really clear about this because it matters. This entire defense system depends on one other thing working properly alongside the fiber: hydration. Here's the issue. Fiber absorbs water. That's part of how it does its job, by swelling and creating that gel-like texture that helps it bind to things. But if you're not drinking enough water, the fiber doesn't move smoothly through your system. Instead of being a flexible, flowing garden hose doing its job efficiently, the system can become sluggish, or worse, lead to constipation. And constipation is the opposite of detoxification. You want things moving through and out, not sitting and dwelling. So the message is this: fiber and hydration are partners. You cannot run the fiber defense system effectively without adequate water. Drink your water every day. This is basic advice, I know, but it directly powers the detox capacity of your gut. All right, so we know fiber is essential. But the follow-up question is always, which fiber? What should I actually be eating? And this is where I want to spend a few minutes, because specificity matters here. First principle, diversity. Your gut microbiome is not a single organism. It's a community, a vast, diverse ecosystem of hundreds of different bacterial species, each with different metabolic capabilities, different dietary preferences, different fermentation products. And just like any diverse ecosystem, it thrives when it receives a wide variety of inputs rather than a single monotonous diet. What this means practically is that the goal isn't to find the one best fiber supplement and take it every day. It's to eat a wide variety of fiber-rich foods across your meals, so that different members of your gut community are all getting what they need to thrive. A diverse microbiome is a resilient microbiome, and a resilient microbiome is your most powerful ongoing defense against environmental toxins, including microplastics. So let me run through some of the key players that Dr. Lee highlights. Mushrooms and avocados. These surprise people because they don't immediately think fiber when they think of either of these foods, but both are genuinely excellent sources of functional fiber. Mushrooms in particular contain beta-glucans, a type of soluble fiber with impressive immune-modulating and gut-protective properties. Avocados deliver a combination of both soluble and insoluble fiber in a genuinely useful quantity. Add them to your weekly rotation if they're not already there. Legumes, broadly speaking, chickpeas, lentils, black beans, kidney beans, white beans, cannellini beans. This family of foods is probably the most fiber-dense category available to most people at an affordable price point. They're also excellent sources of plant protein. I tell patients who are trying to meaningfully increase their fiber intake to start here. Legumes give you the most fiber per calorie. They're incredibly versatile in the kitchen, and they feed a broad spectrum of beneficial gut bacteria. Soluble fiber, specifically for toxin binding. If binding is what we're after, and for microplastics it is, soluble fiber is particularly effective because of its gel-forming properties. The best dietary sources of soluble fiber include oats, flax seeds, and apples. These are easily incorporated into daily meals. Oats at breakfast, ground flax seeds stirred into yogurt or a smoothie, an apple as a snack. Simple, accessible, powerful. Tree nuts, walnuts, pecans, almonds, pistachios, macadamias. All of these deliver fiber alongside healthy fats and a range of polyphenols that support your microbiome. They're also quite satisfying, which makes them an easy addition to a diet without feeling like deprivation. Now here's the pro tip that I think deserves its own moment, because it's one of those pieces of information that sounds surprising but is beautifully supported by science. Resistant starch. You've heard me mention that your gut bacteria ferment fiber. Resistant starch is a specific type of carbohydrate that functions similarly. It resists digestion in the small intestine and arrives intact in the large intestine, where your gut bacteria can ferment it, producing those beneficial short-chain fatty acids we talked about earlier. Now here's the practical trick. When you cook rice or potatoes and then refrigerate them overnight, the cooling process causes the starch structure to change. It forms what's called retrograde starch, which behaves as resistant starch. So yesterday's cooked rice or roasted potatoes, eaten cold or reheated the next day, actually provide more resistant starch and are more beneficial for your gut microbiome than fresh, just cooked rice or potatoes. I know that might sound strange, but it's real food science. If you're someone who meal preps, or who regularly has leftover rice or potatoes, you're already doing this without knowing it. And now you know why it's actually a good thing. The bottom line on diet for microplastic defense: eat broadly, eat colorfully, eat an abundance of plants in their various forms. vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds. Your microbiome wants a feast, not a menu with one item. Alright, I want to share one more strategy before we wrap up today. And this is one that I genuinely enjoy sharing because people love it. It involves something that billions of people already do every morning without realizing it has this additional benefit. Tea. Specifically, the act of steeping tea, whether you prefer a classic black tea, a green tea, an herbal blend, whatever it is that's your thing. Tea is already well established as a health-promoting beverage. The polyphenols in tea, compounds like EGCG in green tea, theaflavins in black tea, have been studied extensively for their effects on metabolism, cognitive health, cardiovascular function, and more. But here's the additional layer that I find fascinating, and it's particularly relevant to our conversation today. When you steep tea in hot water, the process of steeping actually draws heavy metals out of the water. Heavy metals, like cadmium, lead, arsenic, and mercury, can contaminate tap water and even some filtered water sources. These metals, much like microplastics, represent a form of environmental exposure that we often don't think about because we can't see or taste them. When tea leaves, or the compounds in tea bags made from cellulose, are steeped in water, they have a natural binding affinity for these metal ions. They attract and hold on to heavy metals, which then largely stay in the tea leaves rather than passing into your body when you drink the brewed tea. So your daily cup of tea is functioning as a kind of final filtration step. You're not just getting the well-documented benefits of the polyphenols. You're also getting a secondary benefit, a reduction in heavy metal content in the water you're drinking. A quick note on tea bags. Make sure you're using tea bags made from paper or cellulose. Some tea bags are actually made from plastic mesh, and those, ironically, would be contributing microplastics to your cup rather than removing heavy metals. So, check the label, or switch to loose-leaf tea with a stainless steel infuser if you want to be completely sure. But if your bags are natural fiber cellulose bags, which is the case for the vast majority of mainstream tea brands, you're in great shape. Enjoy your cup. It's doing more work for you than you probably realized. Okay, let's bring this all together. I want to circle back to where we started. Microplastics are in the human brain. They're in arterial walls, in placentas, in breast milk. They're in the air around us right now, shed from car tires and synthetic materials and industrial processes that are not going away anytime soon. And here's the honest medical reality. We cannot achieve zero exposure. That's not a realistic goal, and anyone who tells you otherwise is either misinformed or trying to sell you something. The particles are in the air we breathe. They're in the global food supply. They're embedded in the infrastructure of modern life. But, and I want to be very direct about this, we are far, far from helpless. We have real, evidence-based tools, and we've walked through them today in detail. Let me give you a quick summary. The 60-second cold water rule. Wash your produce in a large metal bowl with cold running water for a full minute. It removes surface microplastics, and it removes bacteria. Free, fast, effective. Start doing this today. Audit your kitchen infrastructure. Replace plastic utensils with wood or metal. Replace plastic storage containers with glass or stainless steel. Use cotton towels instead of microfiber. Swap plastic produce bags for cloth. Be mindful of high-shedding plastic drinkware in social settings. Each of these swaps reduces your ongoing daily exposure. Prioritize dietary fiber in abundance and variety. Legumes, mushrooms, avocados, oats, flax seeds, apples, tree nuts, whole grains. Eat broadly. Feed your microbiome a diverse buffet. Use the resistant starch trick with refrigerated rice and potatoes, and drink your water. Fiber cannot do its job without hydration. Drink your tea. Black, green, herbal, your choice. Beyond all its well-established health benefits, steeping tea acts as a natural heavy metal binder in your water, providing one more layer of protection. These aren't complicated. They're not expensive. They don't require a specialty grocery store or a supplement stack. They're accessible, practical, and grounded in real biology. Here's the broader perspective I want to leave you with. Your body is remarkable. It evolved over millions of years to deal with toxins and foreign materials. Your liver, your kidneys, your immune system, your gut, these systems are sophisticated beyond what we can fully map, even with modern science. And they are working for you every single day without you having to consciously think about it. What these strategies do is not create a defense system from scratch. They support the one that already exists. They give your body the tools, the fiber, the hydration, the reduced ongoing exposure that allow your innate detoxification systems to function at their best. Think of it like this. These strategies are the equipment and the training that allow that team to perform at its best. Without the equipment, the team is still working. They just have to work much harder with far less to show for it. I often say this to patients. The decisions you make in your kitchen today have biological consequences that show up in your tissues months and years from now. And that goes both ways. Every piece of plastic cookware you replace, every diverse plant food you add to your plate, every time you let that cold water run for a full 60 seconds, those choices compound over time into a meaningfully lower toxic burden and a more resilient, better supported biology. We cannot control everything about our environment, but we have profound influence over our kitchen, our diet, and our daily habits. And that influence, exercised consistently, is genuinely powerful. I hope today gave you something concrete to work with. If you have questions about any of the strategies we talked about, the fiber mechanisms, the kitchen swaps, the resistant starch science, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to address them. And if this kind of evidence-based, practical health content is useful to you, I'd love for you to stick around. We're going to keep going deep on topics like this, because I genuinely believe that understanding your own biology is one of the most empowering things you can do for your long-term health. Take care of yourself. Be intentional, and I'll see you in the next one.